I'm going to address the elephant in the room right off the bat. I'm using a looper pedal for this video, and yes, I'm wearing Jurassic Park socks. Every time there's a looper pedal in the video, somebody's always like, hey, nice socks. What are you supposed to do? What kind of shoes, what kind of footwear is appropriate for a video in which I'm looping around? So I'm just leaning in, and we're going Jurassic Park. We're talking about how to just solo something simply. I know like a lot of beginner intermediate players have a hard time soloing because it's always like minor pentatonic, this and that. But today I'm going to break it down, do a few simple tips that really helped me kind of be able to play over anything. And we're going to do this in the key of G. So the chord progression is going to be G major, B minor, D major, C major. So it's going to be a 1, 3, 5, 4 progression, right? So I can loop this on the looper pedal right here. Let's get started. 1, 2, 3, 4, G, B minor, D major, C major, then loop it. A lot of space in these. So we've got a couple different ideas here, but I think it's just kind of like a smooth, even sound with super good compressed tone. This video is sponsored by Sweetwater and Pigtronix. Specifically, I'm using the Philosopher's Tone 2 as a compressor pedal and the Infinity 3 looper pedal. All right, so using a compressor with a looper, I think is something that's very important because it keeps everything under control, right? Once you start using layers and everything, you want a manageable volume that isn't kind of like peaking in some areas and not sustaining in others, right? So first of all, what do we have here? We've got the key of G, all right? The people's key. So what I'm going to start doing when I have this loop in, I'm just going to think of G major. Even though I know that the chords are changing from G to B minor to D to C, right? I want to just think of G major and the notes of G major on top of all these chords. So we're not playing with the changes. We're just familiarizing ourselves with the key, all right? And I think the best way to do that is to start with a triad, right? So again, you've probably seen this shape before where it's just the 4th fret of the G string, the 3rd fret of the B string, and the 3rd fret of the high E string, right? What we're gonna do is we're gonna start with a little lick. Okay, that's what we're gonna start with, all right? Now you can do this over any major chord that you see. I'm sliding into the major 3rd, as it were, right? And then I'm going 3, 5 on the B string, and then the G on the high E string, 3rd fret. Okay, so I'm going forward and backwards. 4 G, 3 to 5 hammer on B, 3 on the high E string, and then 5, 3 on the B string, back to the major 3rd of G on that G string, which is a B. All right, so the first lick is like this. I can play the loop again, right? So I'm gonna go to the lick. Now, the thing is, it's like we're using that lick at the beginning of every phrase, essentially, right? And I think thinking of phrasing is a very important thing when you're starting to really kind of explore doing maybe longer solos, right? I think a lot of times I get a question of what even is phrasing. I think of it as just like saying something musically. So I have that lick that I'm beginning with, and then I'm ending on 2G. Okay, that's just the first time. So maybe the next time. See, I'm ending the phrase there. And And then every time I've ended that phrase, it all starts the same way, so it has a little bit of familiarity, almost kind of like a handle that you can grab onto for going through the rest of the solo. And I think that's probably the most important concept that I can talk about today, is having some kind of handle that you always know how to get back to. And for this, it's going to be that little lick riff that comes from the G major scale or the G major chord triad and dancing around that, okay? So there's our handle. That's what's gonna happen in the first part of the solo, the first part of every phrase, and then I'm gonna just end it with a different note around here, okay? The last thing I did is I took the G on the G string 12th fret. I will say it's like, so this Philosopher's Tone 2 pedal is awesome because you can tell, like, as soon as it gets a little out of control, it kind of chokes the note back in. It's like an optical style compressor. Really cool. There's like a lot of different things going on here. This is just an overall volume level. I can hear, here's what it sounds without the pedal. And then as soon as I engage it, so see how it just kind of evens everything out? You lose a little bit of the attack of the initial note, but you can always adjust that with the blend knob in the middle here. Again, overall volume, blend. We've got this right here, the sustain of it, which is essentially the threshold of the compressor, which is why when you hit it, it just kind of rings out forever. And again, that's what kind of glues everything together too. And then it has a treble, so you can get a treble boost or cut, so you can kind of take some of the high end off or add it back in. We'll talk a little bit more about the grit section later, but I want to go into the next part of the solo lesson here, right? So let's start the loop again. Let's go higher. So now we're taking it from the handle that we started with, and then we're going into a new idea into a different part of the fretboard, okay? So this is in the key of G, like I said before, people's key. Just like Sweetwater is the people's company, always sending us free candy with every order. So I'm thinking of a different chord voicing for G, which is this D major looking chord voicing right here, where it is the 8th fret of the B string, and then I can make that D major chord shape around it. So let's just mess with this little chord voicing on top of the loop again. It adds a nice layer, right? But then we can add from here. So this is actually, I'm looking at this chord voicing as a gateway into the higher register of the guitar, okay? So we are combining two different ideas. We've got that kind of intro lick and using that as the beginning of one area of phrasing, and then we're gonna jump higher into a chord voicing that isn't so far away, right? Again, this to here isn't that much of a jump. There's a million ways we can connect these, which we'll talk about later, but we're starting with this G major chord and going to this G major chord, 7, 8, 7. And again, because all this is in the same key, we can move this around for different keys, or we can play these over any of the chords that are going around, so long as they're in the same key, right? So now why I think this is a great gateway chord into something higher is because our root note is essentially the bottom of this chord. What I mean by that, it's like the highest fret in the chord voicing. That 8th fret is a G note. So if we switch fingers and we go from here, we can use an arpeggio shape to start off this root note. My favorite one ever is a little 5-note arpeggio, 5-note scale. Pentatonic would be the name for that. G, A, B, D, E. Okay, any major chord you can use this. Alright, and now the nice thing about this one here we go one position higher, we end up on the high G on the high E string, which is the 15th fret. And this just happens to be E minor pentatonics position 1, right? Where everything on the 12th fret is fair game, and then 12, 15, 12, 14, 12, 14, 12, 14, 12, 15, 12, 15, which is just an octave higher than open 3, open 2, open 2, open 2, open 3, open 3. Okay? So hopefully that made sense. Basically, the minor pentatonic scale for G would be E. E is the relative minor of G. So that's why we get that open 3, open 2. And again, we can use that over the loop. But it blends too much with what we already did, right? Because we played these chords in essentially the same register. We want to get something higher. So that's why when you solo in minor pentatonic in the next octave, it sounds a lot better. So we want to get up here eventually. Now, again, another thing about phrasing is maybe if you're doing a longer solo or you're just kind of jamming with yourself, maybe you start low using that stuff in the beginning and then work your way into the higher register. So for example, we could start with what we already did. So, because we kind of spaced out how it happened, once I finally got into my stock pentatonic scale playing, it actually kind of sounded different because we started in a different thing. It wasn't always just, up and down minor pentatonic scale. So I want to bring this to the pedal again because it has a whole grit section which you can add to overdrive, right? So again, the thing about a compressor pedal is, when everything is kind of glued together like that, sometimes it might be hard to stand out. So the cool thing about the Philosopher's Tone 2 is it has its own grit channel where you can kind of just engage it. And then it really just kind of adds some high end. So this is still on the neck pickup, which is kind of cool. See, so on and off. And then you have this dial right here, this knob. This is an overall grit knob. And it still has all the cool sustain. It even has this rocker switch, as they call it. So you can go from like a silicon to like a germanium style. So what we're gonna do is I want to dial the grit back a little bit. We're gonna keep it there, but when I go into the higher register, that's when I'm actually gonna, let me put that grit down just a little bit. That's when I'm gonna engage the grit, so it kind of has even a higher character of what we're doing, right? Then may I go to the middle? a lot of cool different things you could do with just this compressor pedal, which also kind of doubles as a dirt pedal, right? So we've got a lot of different things going on right now. I think it's cool to be able to jump around back and forth between them. I also said I wanted to do another thing where I connect this part to this chord right here. And again, that's just kind of understanding how you can do these different runs over maybe like different arpeggios, right? So for instance, let's do two different examples of this. We already started with this G major chord right here, right? Now the other chords in this progression that we used are C major, D major, and then B minor, right? Now we can do them on the higher strings the same way. For the C, we just have to know that the C is the 8th fret on the high E string, the D, and then the B minor. And again, the cool thing about maybe just connecting that to that, there's that B minor chord just on top, just the 7th fret. If you just really add this right here, now all of a sudden it's that G major chord. Again, B minor and G major are really only one note apart. Minor, major, right? So again, I like kind of just thinking of that as coming from here. So remember, there's our intro lick that we started, 4G, 3-5, 3-5, and then we can connect that with that 7th fret all the way down. So now we have this little box where it's just the 3rd fret, the 5th fret, and the 7th fret on the B and the E strings. And that can also lead us into the other chords, that C major chord and that D major chord here. C, D, right? So G major, B minor, C major, D major. Now that's not the order that we played them in. We did the D and the C separately, but I'll just play those notes over what we have so far. G, D, there's G, so now I'm playing with the changes. Now I'm in E minor pentatonic. Now go back to the handle, right? Got a little excited and bent the high E string off the fretboard there, but I think you get the idea. It's kind of, once you see the higher register as different chords that you can jump around in between, I think it gets so much easier connecting any type of run that you would ever want to do. And then again, I really think just having some kind of thing that you can always come back to is just a really important thing. So thank you to Sweetwater for sponsoring the video. Thank you to Pigtronix for sending over the Philosopher's Tone 2, also rocking the D'Angelico Deluxe SS and the Supro Royale amp. All this stuff, I'll have an affiliate link, really helps the channel out. Even if you don't get this stuff, anything that you get from Sweetwater, please consider going through my link. It helps the channel out more than you could ever possibly imagine. So thanks for watching. If you guys have any questions or comments, hit me up in the comment section or the website, and I'll talk to you all soon.